I still remember the exact sound of the email notification. It was 3:47 a.m., and I was awake because mothers who have lost children do not sleep. We simply wait in the dark for the world to make sense again. The sound was a chime, the default chime of the phone I had bought secondhand because I could not afford new. And it woke me from a dream where Zara was still 9 years old and we were cooking jollof rice together, and she was complaining that I used too much pepper. In the dream, she was alive. In the dream, she had not disappeared into a template that a man had written to convince me that my own daughter had chosen to leave me. I reached for the phone with hands that had scrubbed too many floors, held too many strangers, aged too many years in the decades since I had arrived in London with nothing but a belly and a hope that had long since curdled into something harder. The email was from Zara's account. The subject line was peace. The body was 3 sentences long, and every word was a lie that someone else had written. Dear Mama, I have gone to a spiritual retreat in India. I need time to find myself. Please do not worry. I am safe. I am happy. I will contact you when I am ready. I read it until the screen went dark. Then I turned it on and read it again, and again, until the words lost their meaning and became only shapes, the shapes of a language that my daughter spoke, but not like this. Not with this perfection. Not with this emptiness. Zara's English was beautiful but flawed, full of the Igbo phrases she interspersed when she was emotional, full of the spelling mistakes that I had never corrected because they were hers, because they were proof that she had grown up in 2 languages, because they were the fingerprints of her mind. This email had no fingerprints. It had been typed by a hand that did not know her, that had never watched her struggle with consonants, that had never heard her laugh at her own errors. It was a template. I knew it the way a mother knows, the way the body knows before the mind can prove. Welcome to Little Bunny Stories. If you are new here, my name is Amara, and what I am about to tell you is not a story about a mother's love. It is a story about a mother's hunt. About the moment when love stops being a feeling and becomes a weapon, when the only thing that matters is finding the person who took your child and making sure they never do it again. If you have ever been told by police, by lawyers, by the world, that your missing daughter is an adult who made a choice, stay with me. Hit that subscribe button, turn on your notifications, and listen until the end, because this story does not end with a reunion. It ends with a list of names, a recording, and the sound of a man being arrested in front of a queen. Here is my story. I was 19 when I arrived in London. Pregnant, alone, with a suitcase that contained everything I owned and a belly that contained everything I hoped for. The father was a man whose name I will not speak, a man who had promised marriage and disappeared when the test turned blue. A man who taught me that love in this country was a transaction I could not afford. I had no papers, no family, no skills that the British economy valued. But I had Zara growing inside me, and I had the certainty that I would do for her what no one had done for me. I worked. That is the only verb that matters for the first 20 years. I worked as a cleaner, scrubbing toilets in office buildings at 3 a.m. while the city slept. I worked as a caregiver, bathing elderly women who called me by the wrong name and did not apologize. I worked as a nanny, raising other people's children, while Zara was raised by whatever neighbor could watch her for the hours I could not afford to miss. I worked until my hands bled, until my back bent, until my English lost its accent, and my dreams lost their color, and the only thing left was the next shift, the next bill, the next meal that had to appear on the table whether I had the energy to cook it or not. And Zara grew. Brilliant as I knew she would be, fierce as I had taught her to be, hungry for a world that I could not give her, a world of universities and conferences and ideas that I did not understand but that she explained to me with patience, with love, with the assumption that my ignorance was not stupidity but exhaustion. She won a scholarship to study medicine, a full ride, the kind of opportunity that mothers like me do not dare to dream about because the dreaming costs too much. She called me from the acceptance office, crying, and I cried too, in a supply closet at the hospital where I was mopping floors, and I did not care who heard me. She was 22 when she met Marcus. I did not meet him then. I heard about him in fragments, in phone calls where her voice changed in ways I could not name. He was older, she said. Established. He ran a foundation that helped immigrant communities, that sponsored visas, that rescued women from situations like the one I had escaped. He was at a conference on global health, and he had approached her after her presentation, and he had told her that her mind was extraordinary, that her passion was rare, that she reminded him of his daughter who had died young. I should have heard the lie in that. I should have recognized the performance of a man who knew exactly which strings to pull. But I was thousands of miles away, in memory if not in geography, and Zara was happy, and I had spent my life being suspicious of happiness because it was always taken from me, and I did not want to be the mother who poisoned her daughter's joy with my own fear. I met him once. A dinner at a restaurant I could not pronounce, with wine I did not know how to order, surrounded by people who spoke in accents that sounded like education and money, and the confidence of never having been asked to leave. Marcus was tall, elegant, with silver hair that he wore like a crown and hands that touched Zara's shoulder with a possession that made my skin tighten. He spoke to me about tradition, about family, about the importance of respecting one's roots while reaching for the future. He spoke about his foundation, the women he had helped, the lives he had transformed. He spoke and I listened and I smiled and I did not believe a single word. But Zara did, or she wanted to, or she needed to, in the way that children of single mothers sometimes need to believe that the world is kinder than their mother's experience has proven. They were married 3 months after they met. A small ceremony, Zara said, just close friends, nothing traditional, which meant I was not invited because I was not close enough and I was too traditional. I watched the photographs on Instagram, Zara in a white dress that did not look like her, Marcus with his hand on her waist, both of them smiling at a future that I could already feel slipping away. 3 months after the wedding, Zara stopped answering my calls. At first, I told myself she was busy. New marriage, new life, absorption into someone else's world that I remembered from my own brief experience of partnership. I left messages. I sent texts. I wrote emails that grew increasingly desperate, increasingly aware that something was wrong, that the silence was not busy but empty, not distracted but deliberate. Then the email came, from Zara's account but not from Zara. I knew it the way a mother knows, the way the body knows before the mind can prove. The English was too perfect. The spelling, which Zara had always struggled with, was flawless. There were no Igbo phrases, no inside jokes, no references to the childhood we had shared in the small rooms where we had learned to be each other's only family. Dear Mama, it said, I have gone to a spiritual retreat in India. I need time to find myself. Please do not worry, I am safe, I am happy. I will contact you when I am ready. I read it 100 times. I showed it to my neighbor, a woman from Ghana who had seen her own daughter disappear into a marriage that turned out to be a cage. She read it once and said, Amara, this is not your daughter's voice. This is a template, this is what they send. I did not know who they were, but I knew she was right. I went to the police. I sat in a station that smelled of disinfectant and indifference, and I told a constable that my daughter was missing, that she had been taken, that the email was a lie. He listened, or pretended to listen, and he typed something into a computer, and he told me that Zara was 22, that she was an adult, that she had sent an email from India, that there was no evidence of foul play, that adults were free to disappear if they chose to. He gave me a leaflet about missing persons, which I threw away in the street because the leaflet did not understand that Zara had not chosen. Zara had been taken. And the police, the law, the country that had never protected me was not going to help me find her, so I became the police. I became the detective, I became the thing that hunts. I spent my savings, all of it. The emergency fund I had built over 20 years, coin by coin, shift by shift. I hired a private investigator, a Polish man named Tomek, who had once been a police officer in Warsaw and who had learned that the law protected the powerful more than the missing. He was expensive. He was worth it. He found what the police had not bothered to look for. Marcus was not an entrepreneur, he was not a philanthropist. He was a broker, a middleman, a man who connected wealthy clients in the Gulf, in Asia, in private estates where women disappeared from records and reappeared as servants, as mothers of children they could not claim, as ghosts with confiscated passports. He found women like Zara. Brilliant, ambitious, isolated from their families by distance or poverty or the simple loneliness of being an immigrant in a country that did not see you. He romanced them. He married them. And then he sold them. The spiritual retreat in India was a template. Tomek found 11 other emails, identical in structure, sent from the same account, to 11 other mothers in Nigeria, in Ghana, in Kenya, in Bangladesh. Each one announcing a daughter's decision to find herself. Each one sent 3 months after a wedding. Each one followed by silence that the police in every country had classified as a choice. I asked Tomek to find them. The daughters, The women who had been sold, he could not. The trail ended at airports, at borders, at the moment when a passport was taken and a name was erased. But he found the mothers. Some of them. The ones who had not stopped looking, who had not believed the email, who had spent their own savings on their own detectives and their own dead ends. We met in a church basement in East London, 6 of us, women who had nothing in common except the template and the silence and the certainty that our daughters were alive somewhere, being used, being erased, being turned into property by a man who collected awards for helping immigrants. We shared what we knew. We shared what we had lost. And we made a decision. We could not go to the police. Marcus had lawyers, connections, a foundation that gave him credibility and access and protection. We could not go to the press. He had relationships with editors, with politicians, with the kind of people who decided which stories were worth telling. We could not sue him. We had no money, no proof that would stand in court, no daughters who could testify because our daughters had disappeared. So we became invisible. We became the kind of women that men like Marcus do not see. We became cleaners again. Nannies again. The background of the world he moved through, the infrastructure that held up his events, his galas, his celebrations of his own generosity. I was the most invisible. I spoke the best English after 20 years. I knew the right words, the right deference, the right way to make myself small in a room full of powerful men. I contacted Marcus's foundation as a Nigerian mother seeking help for my niece, a bright girl who needed a sponsor, a mentor, a path to the future that I had never been able to provide. I played the role he expected. Grateful, desperate, traditional, the kind of woman who would never question a man who offered rescue. He bit immediately. He loved rescuing women. It was the foundation of his brand, the core of his performance. He invited me to his events, his dinners, his galas. I attended them all, dressed in the traditional clothes that he associated with submission, with gratitude, with the kind of immigrant who knew her place. I smiled, I nodded. I thanked him for his work, his generosity, his commitment to women like me, and I recorded everything. I bought a recorder with the last of my savings, a small device that fit in my bra that captured conversations in rooms where no one thought to be careful. I learned Marcus's patterns, his arrogance which made him careless, his need to perform which made him talk too much, his belief that women like me were too simple, too grateful, too powerless to ever become dangerous. He talked to me about his work. Not the foundation work, the public work, the speeches and the awards, the real work, the logistics, the clients, the girls who did not adapt, who cried too much, who had to be relocated. The word he used was not relocated. I heard it once, at a dinner where the wine was expensive and his tongue was loose. He was talking to a man from Dubai, a client, a man who owned buildings that touched clouds, and he said the last one she was difficult. We had to replace her, but the new one she is better trained. She understands gratitude. I recorded it. I recorded everything. The names of the clients, spoken in passing. The dates of the weddings, matched to the dates of the disappearances. The references to girls as product, as inventory, as assets to be managed. I recorded him boasting about his success rate, about the families who never asked questions, about the police who never investigated because the girls were adults, because the emails were proof, because the world did not care about immigrant daughters who chose to disappear. I found the other mothers. The ones from the church basement and new ones, women who had found each other in the dark corners of the internet, in forums for missing persons, in the spaces where the world did not look. I shared what I had, they shared what they had. Together we built a map, 12 women, 12 daughters, 12 disappearances, all following the same pattern, all connected to the same man. We needed a stage. And Marcus, generous in his narcissism, was about to give us one. The gala was his annual event, the highlight of his foundation's calendar. 500 guests, black tie, held at a hotel that had once been a palace. The prince would be there, or a duke, or some member of the royal family whose presence validated Marcus's importance, whose handshake made him legitimate. Marcus would receive an award for his service to immigrant communities, a crystal statue that would sit on his shelf next to the photographs of the women he had destroyed. I was invited. Not as a guest. As staff. One of the women who served the drinks, who cleared the plates, who moved through the room like furniture. It was perfect. It gave me access to everything. The kitchen. The service corridors. The audio system that I had spent 3 weeks learning to operate. The other mothers were guests. They had pooled their remaining money, borrowed from friends, lied to employers, to buy tickets that cost more than a month's rent. They sat at tables scattered through the room, indistinguishable from the philanthropists and politicians and celebrities who had come to celebrate Marcus's goodness. The night of the gala, I wore my traditional dress. The one Marcus had complimented, the one he had said showed my respect for my roots. I worked the room, serving champagne, smiling at jokes I did not understand, being invisible in the way that I had learned over 20 years of cleaning other people's houses. And I waited. Marcus took the stage at 9 p.m. He was wearing a tuxedo that cost more than my car if I had owned a car. He was introduced by a woman from the Royal Foundation, who spoke about his dedication, his compassion, his transformative impact on vulnerable communities. He accepted the award with practiced humility, holding the crystal statue like a child, blinking back tears that he had probably practiced in a mirror. He began his speech. He talked about his journey, his faith, his belief that every person deserved a chance to build a life. He talked about the women he had helped, the families he had reunited, the futures he had made possible. He talked about his own immigrant roots, a lie I knew because Tomek had checked, because Marcus had been born in Surrey to parents who had never left England. I waited. I waited for the moment when the audience was most rapt, when the cameras were closest, when the narrative was at its peak. And then I pressed the button. The screens behind him went dark. He paused, confused, still smiling, the way all performers pause when the script changes. Then the screens lit up with a photograph. Zara at 22 in her white dress, smiling at a future that had already been sold. The audience murmured. Marcus turned, saw the image, and his smile flickered. I pressed the next button. The screens showed the email, the template. Dear Mama, I have gone to a spiritual retreat in India. The same words, sent to 12 mothers from 12 daughters who had never chosen to leave. I walked out of the kitchen. I walked through the service door into the main hall. I was still wearing my serving apron, still holding a tray of champagne glasses that I set down on the nearest table. I walked to the center of the room and I began to speak. My name is Amara, I said. My voice was steady. It was the voice I had used to calm Zara when she was sick, to negotiate with landlords when we were behind on rent, to survive in a country that had never wanted me. I am the mother of Zara Akafur, who married Marcus Whitfield 3 years ago and disappeared 2 months later. I received an email saying she had gone to India. I have not heard her voice since. I looked at the audience. I looked at the cameras. I looked at the royal family member whose presence had validated this man. I am not the only one, I said. Then Maria stood. She was from Ghana, a woman of 50 with hands that had cleaned more floors than Marcus had ever walked on. She read the name of her daughter, the date of her wedding, the date of her disappearance, the template email she had received. Then Amina stood, then Fatu, then Grace, then Halima, then Isha, then Kemi, then Nadia, then Priya, then Sidi, then Yemi. 12 mothers standing in a room full of tuxedos reading the names of their stolen daughters, building a chorus of loss that Marcus's microphone could not amplify over. The audience was silent, then standing, then weeping. The journalists were filming, the cameras catching everything, the narrative shifting in real time from celebration to exposure. I pressed the final button. The recording played, Marcus's voice, drunk, arrogant, careless. The last one, she was difficult. We had to replace her, but the new one, she is better trained. She understands gratitude. The police, present for security, moved toward the stage. Marcus tried to run, but the mothers had positioned themselves at the exits, a human chain of grief that he could not break. They arrested him in front of the cameras, in front of the royal family member, in front of the world that had celebrated him. I did not watch them take him away. I walked out of the hall, through the kitchen, into the alley behind the hotel. I sat on a crate that smelled of garbage and old vegetables and I cried, not for Marcus, not for justice, for Zara, for the daughter I had not yet found, for the laugh I had not heard in 3 years. They found her 2 weeks later. In Dubai, in a house with walls that touched the sky, with a son she had not chosen to have and a passport she was not allowed to touch. She was alive, she was not the same. The woman who came off the plane was thinner, quieter, flinching at loud noises in a way that made my chest collapse. She did not laugh when she saw me. She cried, but it was a different kind of crying, a crying that came from a place I could not reach. We live together now. In a small apartment in London, the same neighborhood where I raised her, where I worked, where I built the life that Marcus decided to sell. We do not talk much. We are learning to recognize each other, to find the parts of ourselves that survived the separation. Some days she holds my hand without being asked. Some days she flinches when I touch her shoulder. Some days she asks about her son, the child she left behind, and I do not know what to say because there is no answer that does not involve more loss. I did not get my savings back. I did not get my 20 years of labor back. I did not get the Zara who laughed at my jollof rice back. I got a woman who is alive, who is trying, who is mine in a way that no broker can sell. People ask me if it was worth it. The debt, the danger, the 2 years of becoming invisible in order to become visible. I do not answer with words. I answer by cooking jollof rice on Sundays, by waiting to see if she will laugh, by being present in a silence that is not empty but full of the work of rebuilding. She laughed last week. It was not the same laugh. It was smaller, more careful, a laugh that knew how much laughter could cost. But it was hers, and it was real. And when she took the first bite of rice and closed her eyes and said, "Mama, you are the only reason I believe in God," I understood that worth is not a calculation. It is a presence. It is being here in this room with this person, even when neither of you is the same. Marcus is in prison. The trial was public, the evidence overwhelming, the other mothers testifying one by one. He will not leave for many years, but prison is not the point. The point is the list of names. The 12 daughters, the 12 mothers. The chorus that finally spoke in a room where they were supposed to be silent. I am Amara, I am 42 years old. I spent 20 years cleaning other people's houses and 2 years hunting the man who sold my daughter. I am not a hero. I am not a survivor. I am a mother who refused to believe the template, who refused to accept the email, who refused to let her daughter become a footnote in someone else's generosity. I am Amara. I am 42 years old. And this is not the end of my story. It is the first Sunday that my daughter laughed again. See you in the next story.